Welcome to Arctic Aurora LifeScience. Today we will comment on the sector and the fund's performance during January. January was a good month for the fund. The fund ended up approximately 3%, which also was approximately 1% better than our benchmark index. The focus of the month has been on mutations causing variations of the coronavirus. This has also caused some uncertainty in the markets of whether we could expect the society and the economies to open up again. As a result, the general markets has been weaker and the healthcare sector has been stronger during January. Not surprisingly, based on this, one of our best contributing stocks and the top attribution during the month was a company that we have invested in called Atea. Atea is developing a drug that inhibits the replication, the growth of the virus in the body when you have got the infection. And Torbjörn, maybe you can talk a bit about our investment in Atea.
Yeah, absolutely. We have talked briefly about it in previous presentations as well. But JP Somadas is the founder. He's well known within the antiviral drug development industry. So he has developed good drugs before within especially the hepatitis space. Was co-founder of Pharmaceuticals and the founder of Idenix that was sold to Merck. So this is all about, as you said, stopping the viral replication. And this could have tremendous opportunities, both as a prophylaxis, if you go into an environment that is, contaminated, you can take that, almost like Tamiflu is used in terms of the flu treatment today. But also, if you know that you have been exposed to COVID-19, then you can do it. You can also do it as a supplement to the vaccination. We know, and we'll discuss that later, some vaccinated people will not get a full coverage, so the immune system will not be activated. If you know that you're such a person, you can definitely also be treated with that. So a multi-billion-dollar opportunity, and especially with their deal with Roche Pharmaceuticals, where Roche do have the rest of the world. Atea still had the big opportunity in the US. And we went in before they became a public company. We came in a crossover fund and invested. The first investment was done to about a market cap of $250 million US. They went out a couple of months later with a valuation of $2.5 billion, and today they are worth about $6.9 billion US. So they had a fantastic development also on Nasdaq. So now we're waiting for the clinical results to come.
So listening to that, it's of course natural that we have a huge attribution from that investment during this month. But COVID is all about vaccines, and the vaccine stocks has soared during January. So Moderna is up 52% in 1 month, BioNTech 41%, and Novavax that we have in the fund is up 137% in 1 month. And that is thanks to the fact that they came with very good data. Daniel.
Sure. So Novavax announced the first trial results in a large study of theirs. They have more actually ongoing in the US. This particular study was a phase 3 study in the UK, and they showed an overall 89% efficacy. So we can compare that, for example, with Moderna and Pfizer, BioNTech, that was 95%. However, you mentioned mutants and the mutant strains of the COVID-19 virus. And of course, UK is now known for its UK variant. And so efficacy there was actually pretty good. So if we divide the different groups of patients infected, roughly half of them in the study got the new UK variant, and the other half got the COVID-19 variant. So results varied from 86% in the UK variant to 96% in the normal variant. So that's fully in line with the Moderna and Pfizer results. So what that also means is, yes, the efficacy was slightly lower in this new variant, but 86% is pretty good. I think
it's very good.
Something that we all could, take.
If we had known that in May, we would have been calm.
Exactly. Problem is we have more mutational variants, and Novavax also concluded a study in South Africa, and South Africa is well known for their own mutational variant, and their results dropped considerably. Almost all patients that got infected in that study carried this new variant, South African mutational variant, and results dropped to 49% overall. We all know there's a big portion of HIV positive people in South Africa, so they had to balance that in the study. In HIV negative people, that number rose to 60%. Again, a pretty big drop, but also 60% is actually a reasonable coverage from disease, something that we see approximately with the seasonal flu vaccines.
So when we learned about all the mutations and the variants caused by the mutations, the mRNA companies also came out and said that, we can handle this. We can kind of change our vaccines so they cover those variants. How is that possible for the mRNA vaccine companies?
It's a huge opportunity and with this new technology to quickly develop new vaccines. Because the thing with mRNA, so mRNA is the code that actually describes for a cell how to manufacture a protein. In this case, what you're manufacturing is part of the coronavirus, the spike protein that sticks out of the virus and helps with the infection of human cells. So if the sequence of the virus is changed due to these mutation, then you just change the sequence of your mRNA vaccines. And in theory, that can be done in a sort of a couple of days. Of course, then you need to go through some validation steps, of course, before you have a finished product. But in theory, this could be a very quick process. So that's the advantage. I think Novavax can do it quickly as well. So they said, and they have announced, when they announced the data from the phase 2 study, that they will file an IND, which is an okay from the authorities to go into clinical trials with the new vaccine variant or the new vaccine versions to cover these mutations.
Yeah. And Moderna has already done that, right? So they are in clinical trials now with one of the variants.
I'm not sure if they've actually given it to people yet, but they have the vaccine candidate ready. And so this has sort of more long-term implication. That's why, as you mentioned, the mRNA stocks went up considerably, because now we have a scenario where you can be given booster shots a year from you get your original COVID-19 vaccinations to cover new variants. In theory, you can have 3 or 4 different vaccines in one shot, and then you have coverage from a lot of mutations.
But Novavax also has an advantage over the other mRNA companies, and that is the storage temperature. And the storage temperature is not that extreme sensitive as it is for Moderna's vaccine, for example. One other company that we were expecting data from and that came last week was JNJ, because their vaccine is not so temperature storage sensitive neither. And it's also one dose vaccine, which could be very beneficiary for regions of the third world, for example. Torbjörn, how did you interpret the J&J data? So?
Yeah, as expected, these data are less impressive compared to the mRNA. But still pretty good actually. And they also tested some of the new variants, and they seems to have the opportunity to get the immune response, at least for the UK variant. So less efficacious, but it's an advantage with only one dosing. It's good opportunity, and they will certainly be used, absolutely.
So maybe to wrap up the vaccines, comparing AstraZeneca J&J type of vaccines with the mRNA type of vaccines, how do they compare? What is preferable, or how should one think about the company's position in the market?
Yeah, we need them all, that's for sure. Because if we look at how the vaccination is going at the moment, here in Sweden it's only like 3% of the population that has been vaccinated so far. In the US it's also lacking behind, so we need all of them. And there's a big advantage that you don't need to have it in minus 80 degrees Celsius, like the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccine. So that's a big advantage. However, then you give away some of the efficacy. But I think a big learning from the last month data is that even though you don't get fully effect of the vaccination, you don't get very sick. Even the negative subjects don't get very sick. Yeah. And that's a very big learning, and that's very reassuring, I think.
Yeah. Perhaps we should mention the JNJ study. They showed 72% overall efficacy in US patients.
Yeah.
And that's a step lower than what we've seen from the mRNA companies and from Novavax. However, they also said that there was an 85% reduction in severe cases.
Exactly.
And that's perhaps the key issue here.
That's the key issue. We need to go have the patients outside the ICU.
Yeah.
So everyone should take the shot they are offered, and then just
and just on the sort of in the pandemic state that we are, the one-shot approach with J&J means that you only have to manufacture half the doses that Moderna, etc. need to manufacture to get a good protection. Yeah. So that's an advantage, that we can roll out vaccinations for more people more quickly.
So we wrap up COVID for this update now, and then moving on to outside COVID-related data. We have had a mixed bag. We have had actually some positive data from the Alzheimer space, which is very exciting. But we also had a disappointing set of numbers from our company Surrepta, that is developing a treatment for this devastating disease, Duchenne's muscular disease. And especially for children getting this in early age, this is really a very ugly situation for the whole family. So is there hope still for the patients?
Yes, I do believe so. When I saw the press release, when I read it the first time, you need to read it quite a few times in order to understand the whole thing. But when I read it the first time, I said, probably if you're younger, you have better effect. But the primary readout in Surrepta was negative. But we believe that this is, and the company believe that this is a mistake in the balance of the two groups. There were one group of children, 4 to 5 years of age, and then another one of 6 to 7 years of age. And in order to compare those two, you need to be totally balanced in the phenotype of the patients. And that was definitely not the case. So they got good results in the 4 to 5 years of age, and then they did not get significant results in the 6 to 7 years. So I think it's a mixed bag. The company went down with 47% in January, right? But I do believe that they do have something there, and they need to get their act together in terms of clinical development and getting the studies designed in the right way.
So it will definitely take time before the stock recovers, but we see the potential, and we really hope for the patients that this will get back and come to the market. Other news is more positive, and from Alzheimer.
Yeah. So Eli Lilly, big pharma, came out with positive data on one of their antibodies in Alzheimer that actually removes the beta amyloid, the plaques in the brain that gives the inflammation and gives the disease, we believe. And they came out in a study, I think it was about 270 patients, and what they found when they compared the active treatment to the placebo was that the active treatment could actually delay the onset of important symptoms with about 32%. And this was 72 weeks of treatment, so it was, let's say, rather short. It was newly diagnosed or early Alzheimer patients, but it gives a good gives some hope to the patients, and they are now talking to regulators and see how they should do the phase 3. They went up with, I think, about 23%, 23.5%.
So big pharma is not that dull as investments.
Oh no, absolutely not. Eli Lilly is, as well as others, are quite innovative. Biogen and Eisai, the Japanese company, they are in a battle with FDA about the potential approval of their antibody against also against some of the plaques in the brain. And they, I think we talked about it previously, that they had a scientific advisory meeting or committee meeting where they were totally wiped out. However, FDA seems to want to have this treatment. They've had meetings with the patient groups and so on and so forth. And the news that came the other week was actually that FDA has postponed the PDUFA date. That is the date when they should decide whether or not this could be licensed, be approved. So they got an extension of 3 months' time because they wanted to see more data, and that is quite positive actually. So the likelihood for success here increased. However, it's a mixed bag. We all know that.
Yeah. So, not forgotten, but maybe a bit off the spotlight is the largest growing therapeutic area with devastating diagnosis, oncology, cancer. And there is so much happening there in parallel to the pandemic going on in the world. So we thought Daniel should give a short update on what's going on in oncology. We got positive data in lung cancer, for example.
So Amgen, I think we've talked about this before, Amgen's KRAS inhibitor. KRAS is a common mutation in many cancers, including lung cancer. But it's been notoriously difficult to make a drug that sort of fits this molecular target. Amgen seems to have been able to succeed in doing that. Also, another biotech company called Mirati has been doing very well. Amgen is slightly ahead, of approximately 6 months ahead in terms of their development. And they announced phase 2 data this month, which was, I mean, it wasn't a huge news in terms of how the data looked like than previously, because we've seen a lot of updates from these companies in terms of how the data evolved. But we've seen that it's the treatment is durable. 80% of the patients with non-small cell lung cancer had a stable disease, which is pretty good considering how aggressive this disease is. So, and this, by the way, is patients that have been given standard of care chemo already, standard of care PD-1 inhibitor, the checkpoint inhibitors, the new sort of immune therapies. Standard therapy. So this is good news for that subset of patients. It's another trend in many cancer diseases is that you treat patients based on the sort of the molecular setting of the disease. In this case, patients that carries this overexpression of KRAS and or mutation of KRAS. And that often leads to very good results. We also had results from Turning Point Therapeutics, for example. Also, again, sort of repeating what they've said before, but also very specific mutations that they're looking at and had very good response rates, over 90%, which is almost unheard of in lung cancer. But if you target the right stuff, then you can have these results. Then we have data from the so-called antibody conjugates, and we talked about this before. So you can do a lot of things with therapeutic antibodies. So one thing is you can connect a sort of chemotherapy agent to them. So the antibody hones in on the cancer and then delivers these cytotoxic payloads and hopefully kills the tumor cell. Another thing you can do because antibodies can potentially bind to two different targets. So you can have so-called bispecific antibodies, and we've seen some impressive data there, especially within hematological blood cancers. So Mersana is one of the companies that are developing antibody conjugates, so attaching a chemo agent. They've previously shown pretty impressive data in ovarian cancer, and they had an update in January, which disappointed the market a little bit because the response rate went down from what they reported previously. It's not like they've shut down the entire project, but
it's still
the
very
drop,
good.
the drop in share price was considerable, and they may have a quick route to market because they're targeting those patients in ovarian cancer that do not respond to any therapy. So it will be
it's an urgent medical need.
Yeah, it's a straightforward study.
Nothing else to give patients.
Exactly. Zymeworks had a similar fate. So they actually combined the two sort of settings. One, you have a bispecific antibody, and then you connect a chemotherapy agent to it. And this was a very anticipated sort of data point for Zymeworks. A lot of investors have been waiting for a long time for this. And the data was, let's call it inconclusive. It was early data. They've been dose escalating, as you do in safety studies, so you don't run into any safety issues unexpectedly. It wasn't, a super effect. And then, these days the market has a lot of expectations in these biotech companies, and if they're not super good, then the stock suffers.
It's quite interesting because investors expect to have perfect data in the first readout, and this is not how biology works. You need to see it beyond that in order to give a good picture.
Yeah, so Zymeworks lost about 25% of the market value. You can call it unfair or not, but at least it will take some time before we know the exact potency of this drug. But they have other stuff cooking in their pipeline. Okay. So we'll probably hear more from that before we hear another update from this bispecific antibody conjugate.
Yeah. I just thought maybe to clarify the Amgen KRAS data, it's a huge commercial potential, isn't it, for this drug and for the mutation or the target in oncology.
Because in lung cancer, at least, it's relatively common to have this mutation. So you can potentially treat a relatively large amount of lung cancer patients, and there are plenty of them, unfortunately.
And we have also Mirati.
We have Mirati as well.
In our portfolio.
Yes. And so what you should consider when you look at this first data, let's say 30% response rate, those that have some sort of tumor shrinkage, that might not seem very impressive, but consider these are late-stage patients. They've gone through all the available therapies already, and both, for now at least, both Mirati and Amgen are doing this as a monotherapy. It will be very interesting to see now when they climb up in treatment lines and they start to combine with other agent, chemo agent, or the checkpoint inhibitors. I think we're all hoping for that. They can move that response rate up a considerable notch.
So the KRAS inhibitor could be the pillar in the treatment of non-small cell lung
and then
cancer
you select
and other cancers as well.
Exactly. And then you select patients regarding their genetic status.
Yeah,
and that's I guess the future of cancer.
It's quite interesting actually, because now Amgen is really valued through the KRAS, the opportunity in the KRAS field.
Yeah, like many other pharma companies, if you can call Amgen a pharma company, they need new products, obviously. So this is hugely important for them to have this.
So listening to those two, you hear that there is still a lot of development and innovation in all different therapeutic areas in the space. And we focus on the companies providing solutions to unmet medical needs, just as the biotech sector has been able to do during 2020 what regards the pandemic. The interest from general investors in innovation and disruptive technologies has been extremely strong during the latter part of last year as well as the beginning of this year. And this has led to that the sector in general has had a good run, but also that certain specific sub-segments of our sector, like the gene editing companies, have had a very strong run. And we have been asked the question, do you still believe in your sector going forward? And yes, we do. looking outside of those maybe hyped sub-segments like the gene editing space, there are so many subsectors that will, or so many therapeutic areas where the medical need is urgent, and where our companies are doing a tremendous work, and we expect a very good development in terms of data during 2021. And we also see that valuations of the larger companies are quite low on a historical level. So all in all, to provide an outlook that we at least see right now is a continued positive interest in our sector, both in the biotech segment as well as actually in the larger pharma segment. With that, I think we are. That's all for this time, and we thank you for listening.